North Korea is making a lot of noise these days. They're testing missiles and launching satellites, right? Whenever that happens, as a South Korean, I'm like, why are they doing this? But what really worries me is the speculation that North Korea might have nuclear weapons. If such a strange country has nuclear weapons, could they launch it at any time? It's a very disturbing issue. But actually, before North Korea, my country, South Korea, had been trying to develop nuclear weapons. So much so that in the 1970s, South Korea was even labeled a potential nuclear weapon state. So why did South Korea want to get nuclear weapons? And why did the project to develop nuclear weapons, which almost succeeded, suddenly fail? Real Korea knowledge. Let's start. South Korea had a president named Park Chung-hee. He was president from 1963 to 1979. Actually, South Korea has a 5-year presidential term, but this man was president for a very long time, almost 16 years, by changing the constitution. You could say he was a dictator, right? So he's a very controversial leader in South Korea too. Some people say he's a great leader who has achieved rapid economic growth in South Korea. Others say he set South Korea's democracy back more than 20 years. And this is the man who started South Korea's nuclear weapon program. Park Chung-hee wanted South Korea to develop nuclear weapons and be strong enough to defend itself without the help of the United States. To do this, South Korea needed only one thing: a spent nuclear fuel reprocessing facility from a nuclear power plant. South Korea was the second fastest in Asia after Japan that built a nuclear power plant. Unlike some of the more blessed oil-producing countries, South Korea doesn't have a drop of oil. So South Korea invested heavily in nuclear power plants early on. Eventually, in 1972, President Park Chung-hee said,
"We're gonna have a spent nuclear fuel reprocessing facility in South Korea in the near future."
Now, reactors basically require uranium, right? But not naturally occurring uranium, but enriched uranium. But when you run a reactor with enriched uranium, you get what's called spent nuclear fuel. And if you reprocess it, you can get plutonium. Plutonium can be used as fuel for nuclear power generation and a raw material for making atomic bombs. Yes, it can also be used to make nuclear weapons. So President Park Chung-hee built a nuclear fuel reprocessing facility in South Korea and then used the plutonium to make nuclear weapons. But at that time, South Korea didn't have the technology to build a reprocessing facility. So they signed a contract with France. Of course, the South Korean government had its intention to develop nuclear weapons. I don't think any country would help the country who want to build a nuclear weapon. So in 1972, contacts began between South Korean nuclear laboratories and French Atomic Energy Commission officers. And then in October 1974, the Korea-France Atomic Energy Agreement was signed. France agreed to transfer technology to South Korea for reprocessing facilities. Around this time, South Korea also signed an agreement with Canada to run its reactors on natural uranium, not enriched uranium. In other words, South Korea now has all the reprocessing facility for spent nuclear fuel. Soon, it could get its hand on a nuclear weapon. But that's when a country comes along to sabotage South Korea's nuclear weapons project. Not North Korea, but the United States. The United States simultaneously pressured the French and Canadian governments to cancel all contracts with South Korea. Once US even bugged the South Korean presidential office, the US was obviously know everything, right? Oh, they're trying to use the reprocessing facility to make a nuclear weapon. So the US pressured France and Canada to cancel the deal and prevented South Korea from developing a nuclear weapon. But why did the US want to stop South Korea from developing a nuclear weapon? Honestly, aren't the US and South Korea on the same team? Why? Well, on the surface, there was one reason. The US thought South Korea doesn't need nuclear weapons. At that time, the US forces stationed in South Korea had nuclear weapons, so there were already nuclear weapons on South Korean soil. Then why would the South Korean government develop nuclear weapons? That's US thought. But President Park Chung-hee disagreed with this idea. He thought that, of course, the US military has nuclear weapons, but the final decision to use them was not South Korea, but the US military. So when North Korea attacks South Korea again, the US will refrain from using nuclear weapons for their own safety. In fact, the United States had nuclear weapons, but it did not use them in the Korean War. It did not use in the Vietnam War too. And then there was another incident that really undermined US credibility. In 1971, when the US military withdrew a division from South Korea without consulting the South Korean government. So from that point on, President Park Chung-hee didn't trust the United States. There were also other hidden intentions of the United States, such as maintaining a monopoly on nuclear weapons, maintaining the military and political influence and dominance that comes with a nuclear weapons monopoly. There were things like that. Now, it has shown that the development of nuclear weapon in South Korea was halted by the intervention of the United States. Shortly thereafter, in 1977, President Carter of the United States sent a letter to President Park Chung-hee. The letter said this: "We will withdraw US troops from Korea in stages over the next 4 or 5 years. All US ground forces in Korea will be withdrawn." Yes, the US had actually given notice that it was withdrawing its troops. At the time, President Park Chung-hee said, "I'm against the withdrawal of US troops, but I won't hold anyone who goes." But the US decision to withdraw its troops actually made other countries more anxious. Japan in particular was worried that the withdrawal of US troops would mean the loss of a safe zone. The Soviet Union and China were worried that North Korea would take advantage of the absence of US troops to attack South Korea. Eventually, in 1979, the United States reversed its decision to withdraw US troops from Korea. So we still have US troops in South Korea today. But here's the twist. South Korea's nuclear weapons project, thought to be abandoned, was secretly still going on. As soon as the French and Canadian contracts were cancelled, President Park Chung-hee ordered to develop its own reprocessing plant technology. And South Korea actually succeeded in indigenizing the reactor. And they also succeeded in developing a missile, something that was thought to take a very long time. By 1978, South Korea had developed nuclear bomb-carrying missile, the White Bear, a missile with range of 108 kilometers. At this point, many foreign news label South Korea as a potential nuclear weapon state because South Korea had the technology to make plutonium and missile technology. But when it seemed like it was only a matter of time, South Korea project to complete its nuclear weapon suddenly failed. The reason? President Park Chung-hee was assassinated in 1979. After the assassination of President Park Chung-hee, who had spearheaded the nuclear weapons project, the new South Korean government of Chun Doo-han had no interest in developing nuclear weapons, and the next government, Roh Tae-woo, actually declared that South Korea would denuclearize. So South Korea is considered to have all the technology to build a nuclear weapon, but they never actually built one. Fast forward to today. Do you think South Korea should build a nuclear weapon? As of late, the level of provocation from North Korea has been increasing, right? In this situation, if South Korea had developed nuclear weapons before North Korea in the 1970s, would the situation have been different? April 2023, a South Korean polling organization, Realmeter, asked South Koreans what they thought about South Korea arming itself with nuclear weapons. The results show that 56.5% of South Koreans were in favor of South Korea having nuclear weapons. The reason was to counter the North Korean nuclear threat. In the past, when North Korea didn't have nuclear weapons, I don't think it was necessary for South Korea to have nuclear weapons because they're expensive to develop and expensive to maintain. But now that there is a speculation that North Korea has a nuclear weapon, I'm starting to think that my country should have nuclear weapon as an insurance policy against that. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. If you're curious about the secret partnership between South Korea and Russia, click here. Thank you. See you in the next video.